Greetings, digital world. Welcome back to another episode of Spliced In Later. Very exciting episode today. We are bringing to you another movie review, and not just any movie review, but a review from one of my all-time favorite franchises, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Today will be talking about Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, and I apologize in advance for any names I get wrong in this movie. It's gonna happen, unfortunately, and I apologize in advance, but I will do my very best. Now, I've been looking forward to this film for a while. If you are a regular listener to this channel, to this podcast, to wherever you are listening to me, you know that quite frequently we delve into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, whether it is a review of a new product like recently Black Widow or all the Disney Plus TV shows that are currently going on, or we go back and we have a look at years gone by, the old films, Iron Man, Hulk, Thor, all of that stuff. This one is exciting because it is the first in a brand new phase. This is the risky point for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. For all intents and purposes, they did the job they wanted to do. They created an incredible story called the Infinity Saga, linking several franchises, several different characters, many different plot points, all came together for a conclusion. And Avengers Endgame feels like a conclusion, a full stop on this franchise. It doesn't really feel like it needs to go any further than that, except for our little epilogue for Spider-Man Far From Home, which complemented Endgame in a very good way, such as Toy Story 4 complements that big finale moment for Toy Story 3. But with all things that are successful, they're not going to stop anytime soon. And the worrying thing is if you push forward and you keep trying to milk that cash cow, not only will you not be as successful in the future, but you will possibly taint the legacy of what came before because you were so quick to rush it. Well, in many ways, luckily, the MCU had the pandemic because 2020 really forced them to take a break. We got a full year of pretty much nothing except a season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and some show called Hellstrom. Oh, God. I'll talk about that one eventually, but absolute trash, whatever that was. Then we had our Black Widow movie, which is, for all intents, a Phase 3 movie because it takes place back in the era of Civil War time. So this one is our first Phase 4 movie. It is the future of this franchise. Where is it going to go from here? We're going to introduce new characters, new stories, new directions. And thanks to the pandemic, it's not even the first one that was supposed to come. Eternals was supposed to come out last year in November before Shang-Chi. So that's already been swapped around. Shang-Chi now has the inevitable task of kicking off this franchise, while also coming out in a time when people thought the pandemic might be easing off or be over, but really it's resurgent thanks to wonderful variants of this wonderful virus, the gift that keeps on giving. Here in Australia, depending where you are, either you can see it or you can't. Some places are not in lockdown and are able to see it as soon as possible. Others are in lockdown and have to wait. And because it is a cinema exclusive, unlike Black Widow, you cannot jump on Disney Plus and watch it. You have to wait at least 45 days, which for some people, they may be in lockdown for that full time, so they may not get to watch this film until October. And then there's rumblings in the background about whether, however much this film makes will determine what other movies do. Will they be pushed back yet again? Will they be put on streaming? Australia here is already suffering because we have to push back our movie releases, even though America is pushing ahead because we just physically can't get to the cinemas in probably about over 50% of this country. So for future episodes, my reviews may not be on time with the global worldwide release. I will do my best, but in some instances, you just have to wait. I'm sure this review will get buried in the many other Shang-Chi reviews anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But anyway, that's all that. I've been able to see the film. It's got a lot riding on it. What do I think? Well, what do you think I thought? Yeah, that's right. I thought it was fantastic. I loved it. One of the better MCU films. I really rank it high amongst everything else. It is not a perfect film by far. There are a couple of little issues which I will address later, specifically towards the end. But overall, it was a great story, a breath of fresh air for the MCU. It was a new theme, a new direction. It revitalized the franchise a bit to show that it could still do different things and relied heavily on specific characters to be very memorable and noteworthy, and they absolutely were. If you are unfamiliar with Shang-Chi, that's fair. Neither am I. I have looked into Marvel comics a lot while going into the MCU, but I don't read them constantly. So I'm aware of that there is a character called Shang-Chi, and I called him Shang-Chi, which apparently is wrong. So, sure, yeah, this is a movie going in, I don't know. The only things I know about it is that this movie contains the Mandarin, and we've already had a Mandarin, not Mandarin in Iron Man 3, depending on who you are. You either loved it or you hated what they did with the character in that. But even then, I don't know a lot about what the Mandarin is or what he does. From what I can tell, he might be a bit racially insensitive depending on who portrays him and how he's portrayed in the comics. So there's a lot going on here. This is also our first martial arts film, the first Asian American culture type film. There's a lot here. In many ways, it's a lot like Black Panther in terms of what it's representing and what it tries to do. And just like Black Panther, it succeeds wholeheartedly when it allows itself to embrace its heritage and what its message and its themes and what it's trying to do. Basically, the basic plot for this film, and because this is a review, I won't go delving into it like I do of talking about past films, because I want people to be able to see the film without being spoiled. But the bare basics of it is that Shang-Chi is a guy. He is the son of Wenwu, who is the leader of this organization called the Ten Rings, which is kind of like Marvel's The League of Assassins. They're this sinister organization that has been existing in the shadows for millennia, led by an immortal leader who carry out assassinations, topple governments, all with Wenwu's mysterious 10 rings. We don't know where he got them from, but they're 10 mystical rings that go around his hands, and when he's got them, he's basically unstoppable, and he's used it to wipe out armies, kill leaders, all sorts of stuff like that. Shang-Chi is his son, and he's been groomed to be his replacement, or at least to follow in his father's footsteps. But for some reason, he ran off. He was sent on a mission, and instead of carrying out the mission, he decided to run away. He took on a new identity, and when the movie starts, he's hanging out in San Francisco with his best buddy for life, Katie, played by Awkwafina. Everything's pretty fine, not much to worry about. They're just going by, living their life day by day. Suddenly, someone turns up because they want a pendant that Shang-Chi owns. He, of course, will not give it to them. He fights them off. He realizes of course, the people that are after the pendant work for his father, that his sister is involved somehow, that Katie is in danger. So he goes on a journey to rescue his friends and confront his father and the Ten Rings, leading to, of course, a showdown in a direction that the film will go in that I will not spoil. But it's a globe-trotting adventure. It goes to certain places. It's a mystical adventure. There's all sorts of lore and stuff being hinted at and showcased. There's, of course, the MCU brand of comedy. It's not overplayed as much in this one. It's quite on the background, which is interesting and a nice change in certain cases. And, of course, you get your tidbits, your cameos, your references to bigger things. This feels more like a Phase 1 movie. It's not heavily reliant on that stuff. Yes, some stuff does appear here and there, and they do reference things that have happened in previous movies. Case in point, whatever happened in Avengers Endgame is going to dominate a lot of these movies for a long time to come, which is fine. You can have not seen that film and still get what they're talking about, because I think Endgame is such a thing at the moment that you would have to be living under a rock to not at least know what happened in that movie, what the whole point was. What we have at the end of it all is a action spectacular, really focusing on all different types of martial arts and lore. What is it? It's like magical lore, where the Ten Rings come from, the Asian American culture and everything like that. It's all showcased heavily here, and it's all really interesting and is very respectful as well, and works really well, I think, with everybody that's in it and how they portray the characters. What I loved about the film basically as well is, for the most part, most of the characters. Shang-Chi is a very, very unique hero, I think, for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because he's not blessed with the technology to build super suits. He doesn't have gamma radiation. He hasn't been given a super soldier serum. He's not from another world with cosmic beings. He's not from space. He's not the son of a king or hanging out with sorcerers. Shang-Chi, for the most part, is just a guy. He doesn't have any superpowers apart from just being trained since he was a child in martial arts. So he's very skilled at that, but he doesn't shoot lasers from his fists or anything like that. He's just a dude, which makes him probably the most relatable character or superhero from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You watch Shang-Chi living his life with his friend Katie, you watch him reacting to things. You watch his dry sense of humor and his weariness. This is a guy that gets tired. If you send wave after wave of bad guys at him, he will get exhausted, in the same way that Jackie Chan gets exhausted when he's punching bad guy after bad guy in his films. And there's a lot of acknowledgements to Jackie Chan in this film as well too, which is quite nice. Shang-Chi, he has a very strong moral compass, a very strong dedication to his friends, and a sense of guilt as well, basically, with what his family is and where he's come from and all of that. But for the most part, this is just a guy who has to go and do a thing and has to deal with family drama, and we can all relate to that. And he plays him in such a lovely way that you relate to him and you feel for him in a way that you probably wouldn't to the god of Asgard or the king of Wakanda or something like that. Awkwafina as Katie, she's really great in this film as his, I want to say, sidekick or best friend. She doesn't, with a worrying thing, it's kind of like Rachel McAdams in Doctor Strange, where they put in a character to be the audience substitute. So they react to things, they ask the questions, they provide the comic relief to get the movie flowing, which I thought she would be in this film. But she is absolutely important to the story. She is essentially, she's got Shang-Chi's back wherever he goes and whatever he does. I do not think that he could do half the things he does in this film or have the courage to do what he needs to do without her support, without her wit, and without her encouragement. And what's great is that with an actress like Awkwafina as well, you do worry going into it that it's going to do the MCU pitfall of undermining strong emotional moments with jokes. For example, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Drax the Destroyer. He's very funny with his witticisms. To a point in that film, though, it is overplayed constantly, even when you're learning about Drax's terrible past with his children and family being killed by Thanos, whenever he's trying to connect with Mantis and they have that emotional connectivity. Just when you feel some sort of emotion going on there, he'll say something or do something designed to make you laugh, and it doesn't always stick. In that same essence as well, Thor Ragnarok. I love Thor Ragnarok, but there are a few people I know who have trouble getting into it because it is so, first and foremost, a comedy film. Thor's best friends, the Warriors 3, die horribly in that film, and it's either played for laughs or it's just not important because that would be too serious to the themes that movie is trying to follow, which is haha comedy all the time. So I was worried that that's the type of character that Katie would be. She has very great comic timing, but she doesn't undermine serious moments. At the end of the film, when everything's very serious and violence is happening and all of that, of all the characters, she is not the one saying silly things or trying to undercut serious moments with jokes. She's very important to the overall result of the film, and that's really great, and I loved that. But of course, on top of all of it, the MCU Achilles heel is, of course, the villains. The villains are normally one note. For example, General Dreykov from the most recent Black Widow, they're just there to move the plot along. What we have with our villain here, Wenwu, the Mandarin, played by Tony Leung, he will go down as one of the best villains in the Marvel Cinematic Universe franchise by far. Not only because he is not just bad for the sake of bad, he has character drives and motivations that are also extremely relatable, and you feel for him. This is a character that you will feel emotional for, and you will understand his drive, and if you put yourself in his position, you would probably do the exact same thing that he is doing. Yes, he runs a terrible criminal organization, but there is more to it than that. First and foremost, Wenwu is a family man. He cares deeply for his wife and for his children, more so his son than his daughter, as is unfortunate circumstances for a lot of hierarchy things. But for the most part, what he does in this movie and his reactions to things and how he talks to Shang-Chi and everybody else is very calm, cool, collected, and there is this motive to his madness which is very personal and very understandable. Furthermore, his goals in this film aren't, I'm going to destroy the world, or I'm going to kill a whole bunch of people, or I'm going to do this for the sake of being evil. For the most part, the rest of the world will never know that the events of Shang-Chi actually occurred, which is very rare as well for an MCU film. It's not a big spectacle where everybody runs going, oh my god, we're going to die. No one will know, basically, what Shang-Chi and his friends got up to here, because that's the motivation that Wenwu has here. He's just trying to do a thing, and it is very emotional, very important. And he has such a cool, dry wit to him as well. Even the bits where he's addressing what happened in Iron Man 3 and the Mandarin stuff in there, it's kind of half dry wit and very menacing, which is fun to. He steals most scenes that he is in, and I loved him in that for sure. The martial arts in here, the main driving point of this film, the main reason to go see it, looks incredible. I don't know all the different types of martial arts, so I couldn't begin to tell you what they are, but they have quite a few different fight scenes very early on in the film and towards the middle, which are very edgy. You see action, they make you feel like you're watching a Jackie Chan film or a Jet Li film or something like that, Rumble in the Bronx, and it's mesmerizing to watch as well. I'm sure it's choreographed, but it looks great. It looks brutal as well. There's very little in terms of over-the-top superpowers. There is a character in here called Razor Fist who has like a laser sword hand thing, but that's about it, aside of course from the 10 rings, the big MacGuffin of the film. Finally, what's also great about it really is its ability to exist on its own. This does feel like a Phase 1 film, as mentioned before. This is a film that does not care about how many Marvel films it interacts with. It will interact with stuff that's relevant to the story or as a fun little aside, but it doesn't detract. You could watch this film and never watch any other MCU film, and you'd still love it, and you'd still feel great about it. It does a great job at the same time, though, of establishing this new area of the MCU that we have not addressed before. Shang-Chi and his host of characters are very interesting, and we want to see more of them, and especially the hints in this movie suggest there's more to this world. We've barely scratched the surface, so I'm sure with Shang-Chi 2 and Shang-Chi 3, or however much this film addresses the big overarching plot that's going to come for the next saga of the MCU, I'm sure Shang-Chi is going to be right at the center of it, and I'm here for it. Unfortunately, it doesn't get the full marks for me. There are a couple of issues with the film, and that's the thing as well. It's kind of like some people are afraid to say bad things about movies when there's that social justice or commentary or whatever going on. But it also needs to be said, this isn't a perfect film. I've read comments where it's like the best MCU film in years, and it's like people are like, do you mean that because we just haven't had movies in years, or because you didn't like Black Widow? Because let's not forget that before Black Widow, we had Spider-Man Far From Home and Avengers Endgame, 2 spectacularly brilliant films. So I don't want to oversell it. This is a great film by far, but it has its faults. 2 specifically that I'm going to mention right now is that where it does excel for some characters, it absolutely drops the ball on the others. Yes, we have our great hero Shang-Chi and we have our great villain Wenwu, but Shang-Chi also has a sister in this film, and you'll be forgiven if you forget about her. She's there to sort of join the gang and go along on the adventure, but you never once sort of learn anything about her or her drives, except that she is in the shadows or is neglected by her father. But that's about it. And where she ends up at the end of the film reeks of the thing that I'm very worried about for future MCU stuff, which is, this could be a Disney Plus TV show. Guess you'll have to get Disney Plus so you can watch that and find out what's going on. That's the vibe I got from it, was like, oh, that's a TV show, I guess. There will be people who watch these movies that do not have Disney Plus and will not go and watch those TV shows. So it frustrates me that using that thing, they're going, you gotta give us money to go and see this to get this bit of information. Xialing, the character, deserves more than just to be set up for a TV show, if that's where they're going. She deserves more than I think she was given. She had very little to do. They throw her into the final fight and they sort of make it seem like it's this big thing that she's doing. But in all honesty, it's just sort of like, I guess she was there, so we'll put her in there. Aside from her, there are quite a few henchmen to Wenwu which do not stand out. And there is one character in here who does return. You'll have done very well to get to this point and not be spoiled that they're in it. I really enjoyed seeing him back, and I loved his comedic timing. But apart from being able to get characters from point B to C, he came and went in the film. He disappeared a lot, and then he came back to tell a joke, and then he disappeared. And I was trying to figure out if that's because they were trying to keep his role in the film so secret that he physically couldn't be on set all the time, otherwise people would spot him, or if they just put him in there because they thought with the character that we're talking about here, he could not be in the film, but we don't really know what to do with him. He feels very out of place in a lot of stuff. And though he is very funny and has one of the funniest lines in the film, that specifically reeks of, we have to do this because the higher-ups say so. So, I don't know. But people will have to watch the film for themselves so they can see what I'm talking about and come to that decision themselves. And finally, this movie does fall into the trap that most MCU films do fall into, with a big over-the-top CGI fight mesh thing which completely makes your eyes glaze over. It's the exact same trap that Black Panther falls into. Black Panther is a great film, especially that dynamic between Black Panther and Killmonger, but it devolves into that final CGI fight between the two of them, which doesn't look real, doesn't really look like the actors are actually there, and undercuts the character development that we're actually enjoying. It is the same in this film. There's a thing that's set up to be, obviously, the big final showdown and the bad thing that's coming, which of course Shang-Chi and Wenwu are a part of, but that thing, that force, whatever's going on, steps up and pushes the father-son dynamic and even Wenwu's character into the background. And once that's done, it's just over-the-top CGI nightmare fuel, which you don't have a character connection to what's going on from that point. It's just they need to do the thing. And it doesn't look particularly good either. There's a bit that's supposed to be in slow motion, and I guess it's supposed to be like the most dramatic thing in the world, and you're supposed to go, oh my god, that's amazing. But for me, I went, oh my, okay, all right. Okay, whatever, moving on. But those specific things, they're minor hiccups in an otherwise wonderfully entertaining, fantastic film. I'm going to wrap up by giving it a 9 out of 10. As I said, it's one of the higher up MCU films I've seen. It is a wonderful new step forward for Phase 4. It's taking it in new directions, and I'm excited to go. It absolutely works in setting up Shang-Chi as a brand new hero to follow, just a guy that we can all relate to, along with his sidekick Katie, who is, in many cases, steals the show for all the right reasons. A wonderful villain in Tony Leung's Wenwu, a good villain that will stand up with Thanos and Killmonger and Loki as one of the best of the best. Great martial arts scenes, a riveting story, good stuff for the Asian American culture and lore and everything that they're hinting at here. But unfortunately pulled down by just a few instances where some characters do not get the attention they deserve, and an overall lack of direction in the final act about what it is about this film that's supposed to be the climax, where what you think it should be is and what it actually be is are very different things. There, I hope you've enjoyed. I hope you get a chance to see Shang-Chi, whoever is listening. I know it's a bit staggered here in Australia, wherever you are in the world. I hope you get a chance to see it somehow, some way or another. It deserves to be seen in the cinemas, but I understand it's a bit hard for people right now. So hopefully, at the very least, lockdowns will lift and you'll be able to see it, or you can get on Disney Plus when it's available there and see it. But I absolutely highly recommend you check it out when you can. It's a lot of fun. All right, thank you very much for listening. I've enjoyed talking about Shang-Chi. I was very excited to see it, and I'm glad I have, and it lived up to my expectations, absolutely. I will be back next week for a usual normal ep. As I said, the movie reviews may be a bit more sporadic in the future as Australia adjusts its release dates due to lockdowns, which is frustrating as hell, but there's nothing we can do about it, so we may as well just go on with our lives. But until then, I love and appreciate you as always. I'll see you next week, and stay safe out there and be kind to one another. You've been spliced in later. Adios, muchachos. I'll catch you next time.